Welcome to Sparks by PRCA, a podcast series channel. This episode is part of the podcast series special, Mindful Communicators, Promoting Mental Resilience.
Hi, my name is Patrick Melville. I'm a mental health expert and I run Melville Mental Solutions. I'm working with PRCA to build mental resilience in the industry through this podcast series. Every individual and organization has their own approach to building mental resilience. And I'm so pleased to have today a senior member of an agency that has grown in size massively over the last few years. Welcome, Alex Clelland, Director of Houston PR.
Hi, Patrick. How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you very much for giving your time to come along. Alex, I would love to hear your experience and what you've witnessed in mental health working in PR and comms.
Well, I think it's been a journey. I've been in the industry now for 20 years and it's changed a lot over that time. And I think the most noticeable shift has been from my personal experience of poor mental health, of finding myself in a global bank, having a panic attack, feeling very depressed, having suicidal thoughts, and needing to be taken out of the workplace, put into care, into hospital. That was a very powerful time for me where my world fell apart. And the treatment that I received after that by my employers was fantastic. And all the care that I received was fantastic. And every time that's happened, that's been the case for me, which I really, really appreciate. I'm so grateful for. However, what was the case at the time was there was nothing beforehand to prevent that happening and nothing after that to stop that from happening again. Whereas what we're seeing now in the industry, or my observations are that because mental health is so live as an issue, that there are more interventions on a daily basis, whether through training or through culture, to make sure that people don't actually reach breaking point, and we try and get to them before that happens. And that's been the cultural shift I've observed, from being so great at taking care of people when they break to making sure people don't break in the first place. And that's very much the focus of what I do at Houston and what we try and do in our work.
And it's interesting what you're saying is that how you've seen the change from your work, from sort of awareness to now actually interacting and talking about it. From that view, from your own experience, what are the methods that have been used to build your company's mental resilience, or outside? What have you seen? What is being used?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that have worked well. For a start, the cultural awareness of mental health is so much greater nowadays, but at the same time, it can be a little superficial. And there is also the risk that people medicalize everyday issues, like say they're suffering from anxiety because they're a little bit worried about something. That is a concern. So we've done an educational program with our employees where people have been trained about what mental health issues are, the actual clinical issues around different conditions, so they're aware of it, not so they can treat it, but so they know what it is. It's perfectly normal for everyone to feel stressed and to feel worried and to feel low at times. That's very different from a clinical depression or clinical anxiety. So there's an educational piece there. But there's also been the training of mental health first aiders, for example, to make sure there are people in the business, in each business in our group, who has access, who's trained in this, is au fait with all of the terminology, the literature, the resources that are available that we can refer people to. So that's a big thing. That's one thing I do. We also have a well-being officer in the company, who is me. My first career was in social work, and so I'm trained in this, and I've done mental health social work over the years. So what I do is people can come to me anonymously, and then I can talk to them and signpost them to different external resources, or to make internal interventions in their support, or to flag issues that need addressing with their managers in a way that could be done safely and confidentially and in a contained way, so people feel able to come and talk to me about anything. And sometimes people come and talk to me about things where it doesn't go any further. They just want to talk, and that's absolutely fine. This is something which I thought would be used occasionally by people, but it's very rare that a week goes by that somebody doesn't get in touch to want to chat about something. And that can be from okay, I need to refer that person to a therapist and tell them to go and see their GP, take some time off work. Or it could be talking to people about how they cope with how negative the news agenda is and how depressing the world seems to be to them at the moment, or how they cope with their role at work and management. So it's all those different things. So that's another avenue for us.
Having someone available to have those very honest but private conversations, just to, everyone is different. It's that kind of role. So for you to, or someone like yourself, to react to it, and where would you say the resilience or play in that conversation? Is it built from just a conversation, do you think, or is it everyone's different?
Well, I think it comes from the conversation, because I'm not there to really tell people what to do, and definitely not there to be directive. I'm there to help people find their own solutions. So that's where I think the resilience element comes in. It's okay talking to people so they get to articulate their thoughts aloud and reflect in a way where somebody's there to listen to them, hear them, and reflect it back. So if somebody's saying, actually, I think I need to take time out, or I'm finding this really difficult, I think I need to do this, then it's for me to validate that or to challenge and to help them on that. So I don't really do anything other than to kind of be a container for the conversation where they build their resilience around it.
And it's interesting also how you mentioned your previous career before, and a bit of context with your own experience. It's given you the confidence to have this conversation. It's a brilliant way of giving back and supporting, doing more than your day-to-day work. How did this confidence come? Was it just a normal experience, or you had your own resilience to have those conversations?
Having that previous career and being trained in that, and I'm also a trained coach as well, so it means that in my management of employees, I've always had a pastoral element to it as well. People have found me easy to talk to about those things, even when there's a big age gap of 30 years between me and some of the newer employees. They're still comfortable to come and talk to me about these issues. And making myself open and accessible, and that's the way to do it. And just being somebody who listens, so people feel heard, and being someone who is actually vocally talking about mental health issues, talking about my own challenges, raising awareness of different things, driving initiatives, so people know that I'm not just being tokenistic. I believe it and I do it, and that I will do everything I can to help where I can. I know there's an important driver for people in the industry of like, okay, we need to make sure people are operating at their best capacity, and fixing people and things like that. But that there's a risk around that as well. It's how we treat people as commercial or economic units, or whether we treat them as individuals and listen to them. And I think, if we treat them as individuals and listen to them, then they perform better anyway.
Well, that's a really good point, because I think there's so many synergies, and from what you've been saying, like normalizing mental health, and also synergies, how on a brand level and a market level, we're brands as well, and we've got to look after ourselves. And of course, the PR role is to promote but also defend our clients, aren't they? When
completely,
and of course that's like a mental health approach. You kind of mentioned the word performance, and of course on the business side, and from the experience that I've had, people tend to see it as it's a bit like PR, what works, what's going to drive their kind of metrics, and what's going to justify my clients investing in my time. But from a mental health angle, the word performance, where does that come into play to justify putting in investment and time into building this resilience in the business?
There are the workshops and training things that people do, which are important and people invest in, and that's an important component of it, but it's not the thing that works in and of itself. One of my favorite jokes as a social worker was, how many social workers does it take to change a light bulb? None. You'd start a group called Coping with Darkness, right? So that's kind of what you can be doing with mental health in PR. It's like, okay, we're just going to tell you that there's going to be a really stressful time. Here are some techniques to help you deal with stress. Get on with it, right? We're not addressing the fundamental causes of the stress and the origins. And that's really difficult. So one of the things that we did was the Mindful Business Charter is a charter developed in the professional services world amongst law firms and some of the investment banks about how to treat one another, how to rehumanize the workplace is how they describe it. And within that, there are sets of behaviors about how you respect one another, how you treat one another, how you manage your workload in contacting people out of hours, even down to how people like to be contacted. Do people prefer email or face-to-face or phone calls, or when do they prefer it? All of those things were rolled up. We became the first PR agency to become signatory to the Mindful Business Charter. And we built that into our culture. And so it goes from being these one-off interventions to being something which is measurable and is part of your everyday life. So it gets built into the appraisal process. How much do you adhere to our values? How much are you honoring our commitment to the Mindful Business Charter? Performance is about what you do yourself, but what you enable in others. The biggest problem with PR is, essentially, we're people pleasers there. We're there to please clients. But if clients treat us badly, what do? A lot of the time we put up for it for too long. And it's about time that things like the Charter were in place to be able to set boundaries and establish boundaries.
It's such a new theme that people aren't aware of, and especially mental boundaries and how you connect with that mindful charter as well. Out of interest, you mentioned the word clients. Is there a boundary that you would recommend? The resilience comes from having boundaries, from having the confidence to use them. Where would you say the client understanding of how the mental health culture has been coming into play? Where do they fit in? Is it a conversation you have in any format or anything?
It really is. I think it's because a lot of our clients have a focus on sustainability, and so they have that kind of mindset where they're also talking about diversity, and they will be talking about mental health as part of that. And so they're aware of the issues, and a lot of clients are keen to promote their own initiatives and what they're doing in it, right? So for them to be aware of what we're doing and how we handle it, for us to actually introduce them to things like the Mindful Business Charter, you start a dialogue. You treat people how you expect to be treated, and we do enforce boundaries, and we do have lines that we don't want to be crossed. We make expectations around how we work very clear. Obviously, it's an industry where sometimes you have to work 24/7. You might be working on M&A. You might be working through a crisis. Most of the time, that's not the case. And you want to make sure that everyone is happy with how they're being treated internally and externally.
Thanks for sharing some of the positive outcomes you've had. What would you say, as we're looking at 2024 and different sectors and different organizations have different budgets, if not holding back, and what are you looking to do to consider more to grow, to support your growth mentally in this year?
Well, I think there are several factors that are very important to us. It is driving cultural change. We did a kind of brand refresh during the past year, and we spent a lot of time looking at values. Values can be an exercise which is just a list of words that ends up on your website. We didn't want it to be that. It's got to be about behaviors. So we spent a lot of time as a company in groups, filtering through, discussing were these things we were prepared to be measured on ourselves in our work, in our everyday work. We didn't nail our colors to the mast on this, and we actually did. So having those in place to be able to drive how we behave through the year, and advancing our work with the Mindful Business Charter and embedding more of it on a more granular level in everything we do, even around like, don't cancel meetings at the last minute. Make sure there's an agenda for meeting. Don't invite loads of people to a meeting who don't need to be there. Don't CC everyone when you say thank you on an email. These things sound like little things, right? But they're things that add to pressure and stress and make life unnecessarily difficult. And at the heart of it is about respecting one another, respecting one another's time, the value of the time and the value of the work we all do.
How do you get buy-in? I mean, again, it's having an idea is, again, part of the work.
Well, I think it hasn't been as hard as I thought, as you might think, because Kate Hoare, who's the CEO of Houston, and I worked at an agency previously together. And when I joined her at Houston, there were only 6 of us, and we've grown from there, and now we're nearly 50. And we both had that idea that we wanted to create something different and create somewhere where we wanted to be. And the talent that we've managed to attract they automatically buy in. Where it would have been more challenging is where we had senior management who were from an old school background or who didn't believe in it. But that's just not the case. Everyone we have is fully aligned on this. Everyone's bought into it. And I think it should always come back to intention. What are you trying to achieve? And we could try things, and we mightn't always get them right. And we don't. We get things wrong sometimes. But we're trying, and we will keep trying. And that's what it's about this year for me.
From your experience, from how Houston PR has grown so quickly, and the honesty with your client, what would you say if there were one or two things you would give as tips for the groups to take away? What would they be?
Respect is fundamental, and I say that because it's respecting the views of the person who's the youngest person who's only just joined the organization, as much as they're respecting the view of a grizzled, war-hardened veteran like myself, and listening and properly hearing what people are saying and respecting it. And if you do that, that's where good things come from. Where problems arise are when people are asked for their opinions and they vocalize them, and then people listen, but they don't really hear them and they kind of ignore them. And then people don't give their opinions anymore and give up on it. And that's where the damage is done. And that's where the cynicism comes around these kind of initiatives. You've really got to be committed and do it from the heart. So respect. And
can I ask, what kind of experience have you witnessed or seen in the industry that maybe has forced the industry to do this?
I mean, I think in financial services, which is my background historically and working in big banks, there were a couple of high-profile incidents. For example, there was tragedy of a young man who threw himself off Coq d'Argent restaurant in a bank and sadly died. And that drew attention to it and threw a real spotlight on the issue. Unfortunately, those kind of fatalities were things that shook the industry and made it look again at how it was addressing it. Initially, those things may have been reactionary initiatives, just reactive to those incidents, but it did stimulate or start or light the fuse for the longer term change and conversations we've seen since. And a lot of those banks have done great initiatives. I know Barclays have about the This Is Me initiative. So that's in financial services. In PR, I think it varies enormously. Because there are so many different agencies, and we've got in-house people, which is where half my career was spent, and you're supported by a big organization where I was. But if you're in a small agency, and how does that work? Then you're subject to much more the vicissitudes of who's in charge or what the culture is there at the agency, rather than a big corporate strategy.
Thank you so much. If I could ask for one more tip that might come to mind about what you would recommend to the listeners about how to focus or build mental resilience, what would that be?
Don't be afraid to be vulnerable, to ask for help. Because resilience doesn't mean standing alone, stiff upper lip, get on with it. Resilience means your ability to flexibly adapt to a situation to be able to manage it. And that flexibility will include, which I learned as somebody who would never ask for help ever about anything because I was invincible, that it's actually only that you realize how powerful a combination of community and culture can be in creating resilience in individuals and in companies.
And if people want to get in touch with you, what can they do?
Well, I mean, anyone wants to, I'm on the Houston website, aclelland@houston.co.uk. Check me out on LinkedIn, connect with me there. I'm happy to have conversations with anyone in the industry about anything to do with these issues, because it's about what we do together. We achieve far more together than apart.
Well, thank you so much, Alex, for giving your time.
Thank you very much, Patrick.